Warning, the following video contains spoilers for the Disney Channel show Amphibia. You have been warned. Hello YouTube and welcome to Prime Productions. I'm here to help enhance your tabletop gaming experience. And welcome back to Inspired Campaigns, where I try to help you build a campaign inspired by pop culture media for either Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder 2e. So, can I just take a second to say how much I enjoy the show Amphibia? I really find it well written. It doesn't talk down to kids, but it's still engaging to adults. It has a few problems, sure, but in general the good far outweighs the bad, at least in my opinion. If you don't know about this cartoon, Amphibia was a Disney Channel animated show that aired from 2019 to 2022 and was about a group of friends from our world, or a world like ours, traveling to a world called Amphibia. Amphibia is an interesting world that is basically a perfect setting for either a Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder game. There's wandering monsters, ancient magic connected to an ancient prophecy, political intrigue, dungeons both magical and technological, and the big villain even tries to blow up the world. The show itself even references its RPG connections, with one of the characters actually playing a tabletop RPG in-universe.
And for fun DM, some campaigns. Okay, if you want to pick up the longsword, I need you to roll for a strength check because your character is like a little wood elf and, This'll be fun eventually, guys, trust me!
So the bulk of the show focuses on 4 characters. This girl, Anne Boonchoy, is a Thai-American girl from LA. Like I said earlier, she and her friends get teleported from a human world to Amphibia by an ancient magic artifact, and in the process the 3 friends get separated. Anne ends up meeting a very kind family named the Planters, made up of 2 kids, Sprig and Polly, and they are taken care of by their elderly grandfather Hoppadiah, or Hop Pop for short. The show focuses on Anne and the Planters navigating Amphibia, trying to get Anne back home, and discovering the mysteries of the magic artifact that the girls stumbled upon. This leads them into a conflict with the big bad of the series, and all sorts of shenanigans ensue. So, spoilers, but throughout the series we learn a lot about Amphibia. First of all, there seems to be 3 big races or ancestries in Amphibia, and while not outright stated, from context clues we can tell that they live in a rough caste system where your social status is somewhat determined at birth. It seems that Newts are at the top. They live in a shining perfect city with free healthcare.
I fell down a flight of stairs. Broke my leg, but luckily the Newts have free public health care.
The city is named Newtopia, by the way. For the most part, the population of Newtopia seems to be made up of people of high education and high means. In fact, the Newts are the only ones with advanced technology. More about that in a sec. All of Amphibia is even ruled by a Newt, this giant guy named Andreas. The next step down on the social ladder are Toads. They seem to be both mid-level administrators and the military of Amphibia. Most of the time, Toads are shown in some sort of military structure, and when they're not, they're still in positions of power. For example, in the town of Wartwood, where Anne spends the majority of the first 1.5 seasons, it only has 1 Toad resident, and he's the mayor. He's also very corrupt and often speaks about fleecing others for money. The last race or ancestry are the Frogs, and they are smaller than Toads. Frogs seem to be on the bottom of the caste system and mostly seem to be tradesmen, farmers, and other blue-collar workers, some small-time merchants. Now, this caste system isn't absolute. We do see poverty-stricken Newts and rich Frogs, but for the most part the social structure seems to generally shake out like I've described. And this political setup could lead to some great fodder for RPG quests. Another thing we learn about Amphibia late into the series is that they used to have possession of that dimension-hopping artifact that Anne and her friends used to get to Amphibia. You see, in the past, the amphibians used it to make themselves into a mighty empire. They got technology from other highly technologically advanced universes. Seriously, they even have robots with laser guns and everything. This empire then raided other universes for their natural resources. Their plan was actually to raid a medieval Earth for its resources when someone grew a conscience and stranded the artifact on Earth to keep it out of the amphibian empire's hands. Turns out that the artifact wasn't just a dimension-hopping artifact, but it also provided power for most of the Empire's technology. Without the access to the resources or the artifact to power everything, society regressed back to a medieval level of technology. It's never outright stated, but the regression is probably because the dictatorial leadership at the time was unlikely to share their technology with commoners, so a lot of knowledge was lost over time. This all leads to having abandoned but still somewhat functional underground factories that would make great tech dungeons for a campaign. So, on to building this out as a campaign. As always, when building a TTRPG based on a pop culture property, you need to think about how closely you want to follow the canon of the series. In other words, do you want to follow the rules of the series exactly, or do you want to bend some of these rules and allow your players more freedom? Keep that in mind as I make my suggestions on how to build out an Amphibia campaign. You may want to skew closer or farther away to what we see in the series. Starting with equipment, most of the weapons and armor in D&D seem perfectly serviceable in Amphibia. We see swords, maces, crossbows, rapiers, all of that stuff. There's also a variety of armor from leather to metal. The weapons list might be slightly more restrictive on the Pathfinder side, as most of the stuff we see is European-based. For example, I don't think we ever see any katanas that I remember, so you may want to restrict those items. We don't specifically hear about magic arms and armor, but it wouldn't surprise me if they existed in Amphibia too. Magic independent of the artifact does exist, and we'll talk more about that in a sec, so magic items are possible. Or, for Pathfinder at least, you could use the automatic bonus progression optional rule. One last note about equipment. Remember how I talked about advanced technology? Yeah, there are ancient robots with laser guns and missiles, so firearm technology is entirely possible, though they would likely be rare. Moving on to acceptable ancestries or races, we have those three main ones in Amphibia that I talked about, the newts, toads, and frogs. For newts, I suggest using the lizard folk for both D&D and Pathfinder. FYI, Pathfinder lizard folk are called Urukshi. Anyway, we see a lot of variation in the height of newts, so you might want to change lizard folk so that a player can choose to be a medium or small-sized creature. I might also switch up their attribute adjustments because the newts in Amphibia seem fairly scholarly. As for frogs, D&D's Grung or Pathfinder's Gripply would probably do the trick. I might modify the D&D Grung to lose their water dependency, but also their poisonous skin trait. In Amphibia, hydration doesn't seem to be a big problem for frogs, but also Anne is constantly hugging and touching the frogs with no ill effect, so they probably don't have poisonous skin. As for the toads, I would probably just make them the same as the frogs, but make them medium-sized and maybe switch up their attribute adjustments to make them stronger and tougher. There is a fourth possible race in Amphibia. Like I said, there are sentient robots, and yeah, one of them even becomes a supporting character late into the series named Frobo. So D&D's Warforged or a Pathfinder automaton could probably do a good representation of those. Lastly, humans. So the problem with humans is that it is implied no human has gone to Amphibia before the start of the series, and humans can't go back to Amphibia after the end of the series. Maybe. Now, humans do develop a portal that can go to Amphibia, but it can't be powered without the artifact, so... If you want to bend or stretch the canon, or say that humans develop a way to power their transport tech after the series ends, maybe that one's up to you. Moving on to classes, all the standard non-magical classes seem to be fine. Barbarians, rogues, fighters, as long as they are a subclass without magic, they are a shoo-in, no questions asked. Now, there is magic in Amphibia that is not related to the artifact. This girl, Maddie, studies magic throughout the series, though it is said to be uncommon.
I searched all over Newtopia for someone who could teach me, but magic users are so rare these days.
We see her clearly studying magic, and I don't think we see anybody with innate magic powers in the series, so magic in the campaign might be limited to wizards, druids, and the like. Maybe include some of those martial characters with some magic training like D&D's Eldritch Knight or Pathfinder's Magus. It's just, we don't see any innate magic users like sorcerers, not that I can recall at least. Another addition to the class section involves that high technology thing. In the series, we see several people master advanced technology, including the main character, Polly. We also see a lot of alchemy-like stuff, including exploding mushrooms called boom shrooms. This makes it pretty clear that a D&D artificer or a Pathfinder's alchemist or inventor would work pretty well in an Amphibia campaign. Unfortunately, clerics seem to be out, along with D&D's warlocks and Pathfinder's oracles. There is a powerful godlike spiritual entity in the series who takes the form of a cat for reasons, but they say they only interfered in mortal affairs once, which was creating the dimension-hopping artifact. And seeing as that ended up making a dimension-spanning evil dictatorship, they say they won't make that mistake again, so it seems unlikely that they would grant anyone clerical spells or become anyone's patron. I don't know, maybe you can reflavor clerics as another type of wizard with healing magic, maybe? Something to consider. I don't think there are too many custom rules you'd need to include in an Amphibia campaign. Anne and her friends do get magic superpowers at the end, but that's kind of a one-off thing and tied to the plot of the show. It's unlikely to repeat itself in another story. Or you could work it into a one-shot homebrew system for like a final fight or something. Point is, you wouldn't need to bother with it most of the time if you didn't want to. As for plots for your campaign, there's a lot of material to mine for story ideas. By the end of the series, the socio-political setup in Amphibia is better, but it's not perfect, and there's a lot of story opportunities there. There's also those dungeons, both mystical and technological, I mentioned, and there's also, like, random wandering monsters. A lot of them. There are huge, deadly monsters that are a stone's throw away from most population centers in the show. Oh, and there's also a throwaway line at the very end of the last episode about discovering an unknown continent on Amphibia.
Guess what, Sprig? Crime just told me they discovered a new continent, untouched by frog, newt, or toad. Feel like it.
So there's a lot you could do with that. You could also just do what the show does. Start off small with a few issues, wandering monsters, problems with a small town, and then build up to some sort of bigger political issue. I think it would work. And that's it. That's how I would make an Amphibia campaign in D&D or Pathfinder 2e. If anyone does this, make sure to let me know. I'd love to hear how it turns out. Oh, and if you need some NPCs for your players to fight against in this or any other campaign, make sure to check out my newest digital third-party published book, The NPC Omnibus for Pathfinder 2e. This book has 36 new NPCs from creature levels -1 to 10, all updated for Pathfinder's Remaster project. It's on sale now at DriveThruRPG or PathfinderInfinite.com, links in the description below. And as always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. That lets me, as well as YouTube, know that you want to see more of this kind of content. Thank you, good luck, and happy gaming!